Collin, brother, welcome to the Interrupted podcast, man. It's cool that we were able to make this happen,
Yeah.
and it took a little bit of working, but it's good to be sitting here tonight. After it sounds like both of us had quite the days before this conversation, so I'm really appreciative of you taking this time.
Yeah, it's been one of those days where you just like you don't know what's gonna happen. Like just the left turns become right turns and the right turns become left turns, and then you think you're going in a circle, but you're actually going down the hill. It's like one of those kind of days. So it's kind of crazy, man. But no, it's great to connect, Steve. I've been looking forward to this conversation for a few weeks now since we
Yeah.
scheduled it, and wanted to make it work before, especially before I head out to Illinois to go out and do some bow hunting. I've got a couple hunting camps. One of the hunting camps I helped put together, and then the other one is just kind of a group of guys who are coming together to hang out and have a good time. And I'm going to do a little bit of my own personal bow hunting as well. So I'm really looking forward to that. But man, I'm pumped to be talking to you right now, man.
Yeah, for sure. No, that's some cool stuff here that is on the horizon for you. I know just in our little bit of lead up, I can't wait to really dive into some of that and just in this busy schedules. But as a little setup, just for some of the listeners, if you're tuning in, man, this conversation I've been looking forward to. As it is, I feel like, Collin, with a lot of my guests, is it starts off, you kind of start seeing people at a distance in terms of social media, that
Yep.
exposure. It's a really cool way that social media allows us to connect with folks. But I just started watching it. It looks like we have some, friends in common and some interests in common, and it's, the algorithms do their magic.
Yep.
But
Yep.
I gotta
Hopefully.
yeah, and that's the intent. But
Yep.
one thing that I gotta say before we get a little bit into your backstory is something that stood out with you is, one, as humans we look for places to connect. Cool. Like
Yeah.
I think that's at a very surface level. It's like common interests, seasons of life, things of that nature. And something that is really cool about how I don't know if this is intentional, but just your social media itself. I I will say I don't know how long it's been since I've been following you, but as I watch, I'm a scroller, right? I'm just going
Yep.
through, seeing stuff catch my eye. That's the idea behind marketing, social media, and I didn't listen to a lot of your stuff. I'd constantly see your name pop up, and it was like, man, all right, yeah, I got that in common. It's not just hunting. It's I see you make stuff, posts about your lifestyle, your family,
Yep.
changes you're making in your life. Never listening to audio, man. Just like hitting it and be like, cool, I like what that guy's doing. Yeah, right on. I should hit this guy up. And you just keep that goes for a long time, because I think at the core what I'm looking for and is this authenticity, or is
Yeah.
this a marketing ploy?
Somebody
And
gaming that trying to game the system or
yeah, and
whatever.
and you know what? To some level, is that okay if somebody's going out and they're branding something, and there's a place for that, right? But you
Of
got to be
course.
careful once you start crossing over into you're exposing yourself because you want other people to be better. And
Yeah.
that's dangerous, because at some point you could be exposed, like the true you
Yep.
could be exposed. And again, before we get into the story, I mean, what are your thoughts around that and kind of how you put yourself out there?
Now I love that you think about things in that way, because I think about things on that deeper level too. My background is actually in social media marketing, so it's kind of funny, because of that. I've been doing business in the hunting space on the marketing level, digital marketing level, for 15 plus years now, and I do know how to game the system. And honestly, it turns me off big time for the fact that, I see a lot of people doing that, and they're just posting certain kinds of content and doing content in a certain way to ride the algorithm and to, you know, do build up their social media in a certain way. And honestly, I look at social media as just a tool to be able to tell my story and share my journey in an authentic manner, so that it hopefully can make a deeper impact on the people who are paying attention. Unfortunately, because we do have algorithms, I'm not always going to get on that algorithm, because the content I show and I do doesn't always ride that wave. You know what I mean? And
Yeah.
and so I almost intentionally don't try to ride the algorithm and do it that certain way, because it's like I don't really care. Like I'm not looking to reach millions of people. I'm looking to reach a few people, a few, maybe 500, 1,000 people, and on a deeper level where they really can connect with me and really can start to see who I really am, hear a little bit about my story, and then maybe, turn around and say, you know what? I can resonate with that. I understand that point of view. Like I'm going through some of that, or I've been through that myself, or whatever. So that's kind of the way I look at it, man. I just try to share authentically. My wife and I talk about this a lot, honestly, because she's like, you're doing that social media stuff more and more now, like, and I'm like, well, it's kind of part of the game. Like what you're saying, Steve, it's kind of a game. Like you have to, for better or for worse, you have to post content to get into the feed. Okay. And I understand that being a marketing guy, but also, um, if you do it, if you're very intentional about how you do it. So yes, I'm being intentional about how I do it because I do want to share my family. I want to share my challenges. I want to share the good times. I want to share the bad times. I want to share hunting. I want to share my faith. I want to share some cool things that are happening in my life, but I think there's a lot of people out there who just share the wins and share the good times, and it just becomes a feed full of just that kind of stuff. And I know that's kind of what you're alluding to, just to game the system and make their life look great and make them look awesome. But we know that that's not the reality, man. I have a lot of downfalls in my life. I have a lot of things I'm struggling with, a lot of things I'm going with. I mean, we just talked about some of my transition going on right now, some of my struggle in a way.
Yeah, sure.
And I'm trying to be a lot more intentional, honestly, about posting more of that kind of content. Just because I think I want to help people. That's the kind of impact I want to make. I want to actually have somebody watch my content and say, you know what? I can relate with that. And I think I need to get off my butt and start working out. Or I think I need to challenge myself more. I need to maybe go try to run a marathon or get in the weight room or lose 20 pounds or whatever that is for whoever that is. I want to challenge people and I want to show that authentically on my end because that's just the reality of things. So
Sure.
Does that answer your question?
Yeah, man. No, that cuts right to the heart of it. I mean, it seems to me, what you're drawing out there is, while you have to be business minded and there's a purpose in what you're putting out there, right? There's intentionality both personally and professionally that comes through. But as we look at these feeds and look what people are about, we first, like I said in the beginning, we look for the connecting point. For me, then I go to, is this guy, as much as you can on social media, being authentic? And then is there, for me as a man, it's hard to find those other guys that then I look and say, okay, I'm willing to take advice. I'm willing to be challenged by this guy because there is a level of, even at a distance, some respect about how he seems to be carrying himself. And it can stay that way through social media, or we can take the next level and engage, right? Then we can send the DM, then we can go on the hunt with that guy, then we can ask the question, and then we start to draw things out. And that's where that exposure piece comes very quickly.
Correct.
And so all that to say, not to hump your leg, kudos to how you're going about that, right? I do appreciate that. I like to really draw that out because it has been quite a while that I've kind of been just seeing those things flash up. And when I was thinking about our conversation and think about even, reaching out to you, those things came to light. And we need to celebrate those moments when people are doing things right. And so I just wanted to highlight that for everybody listening. It's, maybe it is just go check out your feed. Cool. It's awesome. But for me, there's a reason why I reached out to you. I want you to know that before we get in here, because when we have the value conversation of what we can bring to people, I think that really is at the crux of it, of what I'm hopeful out of these next, few minutes that we're going to be spending together, man. So,
hey man, I appreciate that, man. And that's a great observation. And I can tell you, like, I really have a lot of respect for people too when I see them doing kind of the same way and thinking about things the same way with their social media content. And then it's kind of nice when you actually meet them in person or spend some time with them in real life. It's like, yeah, this guy is really like what he shows, you know what I mean? And that's because I've honestly been, I've met some guys that I were a certain way on social media and I was let down. And unfortunately, it was like, come on, man, like you got to do better. And honestly, I used to be that guy. So I had to get better. I had to grow up and get better myself. So take me as the example of that. I used to be the guy who did a lot of talking, especially on social media, and did not do a lot of walking, and did not do a lot of leading by action. So, we all go through different stages of life, of course, and are have to be challenged. And I'm glad I've been challenged in that. My wife leading the way on that,
There you go.
and which is awesome. But that's why I am the way I am now, because not only do I need to turn myself around, but now I can be intentional with that and try to help other people and hopefully make some kind of impact and inspire them, and maybe help them get on the path of taking action in their life too. So good
Right
stuff,
on.
man. I love that.
Yeah, no, I hear that coming through. Well, let's pause for a minute and do a little flashback, and I want some context for everybody, as I'm sure you've had the opportunity to share your story many times on different platforms and talking to people. As we talk a little bit about your backstory, what I really want people to draw out is, I think. The evolution of you, maybe not so much the sequence of events,
Yeah.
but I'd love you to talk about, as you grew up, kind of some key points where you see those transitions, and whether they've come from a mentor, whether they come from a parent, whether they come from a failure. Can you just give us a little of your backstory? But if there are some of those really marquee moments in your life that you could highlight for us,
Yeah.
I believe that is going to help when we start talking about where you're at now,
Yep.
and when people look back over their lives and say, "Hey, man, I had that kind of marker that's similar." If you would do that, that would be phenomenal, man.
Yeah, absolutely, man. I'll try to keep it short and sweet and to the
Uh,
point as much
You're
as I
good.
can, because I've got a lot of, I don't know, I kind of got a crazy cool story in a way. It's an interesting story for sure. But honestly, I grew up in a small town, central Minnesota. Honestly, it was the poorest county in Minnesota. So
Mhm.
400 people, no stoplights, farming community, very humble community, hardworking, get after it every day, farming, ranching. Sports was a big deal growing up. We had a pretty powerhouse football team for a 9-man football team in Minnesota. We were known as a really good team growing up. And so really growing up, my draw, um, right away was to sports, football, baseball, basketball, wrestling, those kinds of things. And just to back, and then hunting is, of course, was a part of that as well, a big part of that as well. So
Yeah.
that's kind of what we did in small town Minnesota, as we worked hard and we played hard. And I my parents divorced when I was 2 or 3, right around in that age. So I had both of my parents around, but unfortunately, at that point, my dad was pretty addicted to alcohol, and that was his crutch, and that was what he was focused on. And so my mom was really the one who was raising me, until she married my stepfather, and they're still married. And I will quickly say that my dad is clean and sober for over 15 or 14 years now
Right
as
on.
well.
Good
So
for
which is
him. Good
which
for
is
him.
amazing, and
Yeah.
we've had to rebuild that relationship. But just to kind of give context to my life and some of my story, I did grow up in a divorced home. I grew up with, my parents were young when they had me. I had a younger brother. It was a divorce, split off family. Both parents got remarried. My mom got remarried quickly. My dad had some different ladies he was with, and got remarried and got divorced. And there were some crazy times in there, just because he was going through some of his own struggles,
Sure.
and he had his own things he had to work on. Um, but uh, but yeah, man, just growing up, like, things were good, honestly. Like, I grew up in, like, I didn't feel like I ever didn't have anything that I needed. We always had a roof over our head. I was always playing sports. I was a pretty happy guy for the most part. Went to the local public school. It was, things were pretty good. It was honestly later in life that I really realized the impact that divorce and my dad's addiction to alcohol and some of those other things had an effect on me. And it was really into my 20s where it really affected me, and it made me somebody that I didn't want to be at that
Did you
time.
recognize that right away in your 20s? I mean, did you say, "Hey, these problems are having, and this may have been, um, the starting point of some of that"? How did you arrive at that?
Yeah, that's a good question. Honestly, I didn't really realize it because I didn't have a lot of good people. I didn't have a lot of people around me who were going to be open with me and candid with me and super honest with me, like on that
Okay.
level, on that deeper level. So part of it is I kind of, I didn't really, I had some mentors, but it wasn't on that level. Like I have now. I have some mentors on a deeper level now who will definitely call me out and call a spade and
Sure.
and explain things on a deeper level to me. I didn't have a lot of people at that time that were doing that. And through my 20s, I had a lot of success. I went to college, I played some college football, did really well coming from a 9-man school. Like I played with a lot of 4A, 5A kids who had scholarships.
Wow.
And
Okay.
I was kind of like a walk-on in a sense at a small Christian school that we were Division 3, but we went to our conference playoffs both the years. They'd never done that before. So I had a lot of success in sports. Um, I started as an entrepreneur really young. Like right away when I went into college, I started my own business. I started building that business. I worked for some agencies. I worked for some different, you know, I had some different positions, but I was always doing work on the side, kind of like
Okay.
honing in my skills as an entrepreneur. Like, man, I can build a business and I can like work for myself and I can get clients. And so I had a lot of success in that,
Sure.
which was kind of crazy. But then as you get older, like I was never a bad guy. I was never like doing stupid things. I wasn't drinking and driving and partying and stuff like that in my early years.
Mm-hmm.
It was more like girls and stuff like that. Just like, not being, not staying true to who I should have been. You know what I mean?
Okay.
But then as I got into my middle 20s, I realized, man, like I'm making some money here. Like I'm not really locked down. I've been through a relationship. I had a girlfriend in college for a little bit. Then we broke up. It was kind of hard on me. And I was like, you know what? I'm not dating any girls for a while. Like I'm just going to enjoy I'm just going to enjoy doing my thing and enjoy, making money and being an entrepreneur and just traveling all over, doing all this crazy stuff. You know what
Sure.
I mean?
Did someone
Hunting
speak
all over the
that? Did
place.
someone speak that into you, or was that something where you're just like through the pain, you were just like you
Yep.
realize that I need to not be involved with in a relationship right now?
Yeah, for sure. I've had to figure this out on, later on in my life that what I did is I went to, entrepreneurship and working hard, because that was my getaway. Like that was my
Okay.
way out of having to realize like that my dad wasn't always present in the way he should have been, uh, especially in the way that I would have wanted him to be now that I am a dad and a husband. So that was my way of like getting out of that. And also I lived in a small town. There wasn't a lot going on. There wasn't really, people didn't leave small town. You stay home and you work on the farm and you work a local job, a factory, whatever.
Mm-hmm.
And that's kind of what you do. And there's nothing wrong with that. I have nothing against that at all. Just, I don't know, God put something inside of me that was like, you know what? You're built different. You're going to be different. And I think part of that pain that I had was I just wanted to get away. I wanted to get
Okay.
out of that. I wanted to get away from drinking. I wanted to get away from small town parties. There's a lot of drugs in small towns, a lot of talking. um, Not
Yeah.
a lot of people getting outside of that. And there's a lot of good too. Don't get me wrong. I don't want to paint a picture because I love going back home and seeing my family and seeing the people that are in my hometown. There's a lot of great people and that have inspired me and mentored me and been there for me. Um,
Sure.
but I didn't have anybody specifically that I recall, like, I had a few youth pastors, I had a few coaches and stuff like that that did speak into my life, but it, I wasn't opening up to listen either. You know what I mean? I was kind of like,
Sure.
Colin's going to do what Colin wants to do, and that's the way he's doing it. And
Yeah.
I think that had a lot to do because in my early years, my dad was like just the kind of guy who like just wanted to be happy and like make sure things were good between me and him, because he didn't see me all the time. So he wanted things to be good. But then my stepdad on the other side was a hard ass. And he was like the
Okay.
guy who was like, all right, like you turn off the lights, clean your room. You're not having a computer in the house. You're not
Yeah.
having a cell phone.
That
Obviously,
structure.
the major structure. He was the hardworking farm guy, and farm and ranch guy, who like, we do it this way. We get up early. This is how we do it. Like almost a drill sergeant without any military experience.
Yeah.
so,
Yeah.
so, and that's good though. Now I look back and I have so much respect for my stepdad, Dan, you know what I mean? I love the guy to death. And honestly, I wish I would have been a better listener. I kind of feel bad
Mm-hmm.
that I was like such a little stinker, man, in that way. Like I wasn't going to listen to him. And, it's kind of crazy to think back to that. But, I didn't really have, it might be like, honestly, now that I think about this, it might be just that I was so hard headed that people, when they did try to speak into my life, that I wasn't responsive anyway. So it was probably why people stopped trying to even speak.
Yeah.
into my
Well,
life,
it seems like you had those like attributes though. The way you're talking, maybe it came from sports or whatnot, of the drive, the discipline.
Sports
I
for
mean,
sure.
it
Yeah.
sounds like your
Yeah.
or your. I'm sorry if I get say this, your stepfather really laid the foundation then for that to thrive.
True.
That
He
discipline.
did. He really did. He really did. And now I do recognize that, he wanted me to he knew that I needed to work hard to have success in life. Like life is not easy. Life is
Yeah.
tough. And as a kid growing up in a small town, like you're not exposed to a lot of things. You don't really know what's going on, and he knew what was going on. He'd been in the world enough to know. And
Yeah.
so you're exactly right. Like, I think he was trying to build me up for that versus because he knew my dad wasn't playing that part at that point. But I was so turned off because it was like the opposite of what my dad was like, that I was just like, man, I'm not listening to this. I'm not going to hear this. I did have a coach that I did respond to though. My coach, Coach Malin, God bless that guy, man. He's still coaching, which is kind of cool. He's the winningest football coach in Minnesota high school football history.
Wow, man.
Over 400 wins.
No, that's
So,
that's an honor to have that title. That's cool.
which is pretty amazing. But I do recall him many times saying, Collin, you have all the tools to be a super successful guy. You have everything you need. You just need to put your head down and get to work and get after it and quit doing all this other stuff outside. Not that I was a bad kid. I just didn't stay focused in at that time. I didn't have the same discipline, obviously, that I have now that you see through social media and different things like that.
Yeah.
And I remember my wrestling coach too, Coach Teckham. He kind of said the same thing. He said, I remember it was like in ninth grade. I was out for the wrestling. He was like, Collin, if you stick with this, you're going to be a state champ someday.
Wow.
And I didn't really like connect the dots at that time. Like, come on, whatever. You know what I mean? Like I didn't.
Yeah, that's just what coaches say.
Yeah, exactly. That's kind of what I thought. You know what I mean? But we did. Well, it was cool. Like when I was a freshman in high school, and then all through high school, like we had a really good football team. I excelled at sports. I was a captain. I got some, all conference mentions, those kinds of things. I won some cool accolades or whatever. Was recognized for my hard work, for my skills and talents. But honestly, I look back now and think, man, I could have been way better, way, 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 way better. You know what I mean? If I actually would have applied myself the way that I do now, it's kind of crazy to think about that. But yeah, I definitely had that. I think back, there was a foundation laid. I just wasn't open to it then, I think.
Yeah. Well, I don't think that's that uncommon when we think about just maturation process and how people grow and learn. But I think the difference is, hearing you talk, you're at a place in your life where you're recognizing those things led to now, and the other side of that, where so many people say, well, I may have had those things now, but my life is horrible, and we see this spiraling, and that's when we see people start having depressing thoughts, and then become depressed, and then search for answers, and it's just that equation, that mental health equation, that at what point do you start to recognize those things and unpack those things, because it's so important to do that, to get the vocabulary even to say, hey, I was experiencing this. What does that actually mean, and what was going on there?
Yep. Yeah, I've definitely had to do some deep work in my later 20s, really starting with my relationship with my wife. I'll kind of go into that story a little bit, 'cause that story has definitely shaped who I am now. My wife and I, we both went through a couple hard breakups. We were both like 28, 27. I'm mid 30s now, so just to give you context to that. And we've been married six years total. And but in that time, we both came out of hard breakups. It was one of those deals where you kind of like, quickly go into a new relationship because you like hit it off right away.
Yeah.
And we met each other online. I'd never done any online. I never really thought that was really cool to do that. And I was like, oh, I'll try it, whatever. I want to
Yeah.
meet some people outside my zone or whatever of where I was living here in Texas. Then I had moved to
Okay.
Texas because my girlfriend who I was with at that time was here in Texas. So I had moved here. Um,
Okay.
but anyway, so we went through breakups, and then we came back together. Well, 3 months into our relationship, we're in love and this and that, and we're having sex, and all of a sudden she's pregnant, and she comes to
Wow.
me. She's like, hey, I'm pregnant. Like, no, there's no way. Like, we've been safe, and
Yeah.
you know
Yeah.
how it goes.
Yeah.
um
Yeah.
and
That's called
we're
denial.
good Christian people. We don't have kids before we're married, those kinds of things. and
Yeah.
and we which we do. We both come from Christian families, and faith is really important to us. And it's like, I said, no, you're cheating on me. You're with somebody else. Like, it's not my kid. Like, this, no, there's no way. Like, come on. And I was building a business at that, or I was doing well in my business at that time as
Okay.
well. So I was not my focus, like, to have a kid. So I kind of, like, honestly, I pushed her away, and I said, it's not mine. Like, I don't know. And,
Okay.
and we broke
Wow.
up. We broke up for 8 months. And my mom, we didn't really talk, I don't think, in that whole time. And I kind of just was doing my thing, living my life, was like, all right, she's long gone, whatever, I'm doing my thing. Well, during that time, my mom and my wife had been talking and calling each other about once a week or once every couple of weeks, staying in
Wow.
touch. And my mom met, I went home for Thanksgiving or Christmas. It was either Thanksgiving or Christmas that later that year.
Hmm.
And my mom's like, you're going to be a dad, right? And I was like, uh, I guess, or I don't know. I don't think it's mine. she's like, no, you're like, Christina's a good girl. Like, this is a good woman. Like, this girl's having your baby, and she hasn't been with any other guys or anything. Like, she's not that kind of person. And you're having a kid. So you might want to kind of start thinking about that, and what kind of impact that's going to have on your life, and what kind of impact you're going to have on that child's life. Or
Yeah.
maybe if you want to have an impact on that person's life. And so yeah, my wife and I had to reconcile. I had to come to her and humble myself and say, you know what, I'm sorry that I put you through this the last 8 months. I'd like to try to reconcile things. I don't know if we're going to get married. I don't know if we're going to even be together, but I definitely want to be part of my daughter's life, whatever that looks like. And
Hmm.
so I'll do whatever it takes. And that's really the start of where I started working on myself, really working on myself, and really exploring these issues in my life. I'm not saying that I have a ton of issues or whatever, that I, oh, sad me, you know what I
No, no, no.
mean? Like, I don't
But
want to
but
paint
for
that
you,
picture at
that
all.
that was your experience. For you, that was everything.
Correct. Correct. I had to start to, like, why am I the way I am? Like, why do I
Mm,
have some of these different downfalls in my life? Why do I
yeah.
look at things this way? And I started to explore that. Well, part of that was, like, my dad wasn't always present. He wasn't a mentor in my life like I really needed. And some of these mentors that were in my life, I didn't listen to them. So it was
Yeah.
it was like a hard fall for me at that point. It was like, dang, man, like, I'm realizing what's going on here. Like, I have some wounds inside of me that I need to fix. I need to go back and really face those wounds, and work on those things, so I can actually level up and become hopefully a good dad in my life, and then maybe a husband or whatever else comes along. At that point, I was thinking about those things.
Yeah, yeah.
Um,
What did the faith community? How did they handle that you guys were a part of? Not to. Oh, that's a whole big bag
it's a
that
good
we can get
question.
into. But I'm curious because it's hard for Christian communities to deal with that because it's uncomfortable, and
Yeah.
we have different personal feelings than we understand. Maybe theology different. Some there's a lot that goes into that equation, and yet we're still supposed to love each other.
Yeah, of
And
course.
so
Yes.
what was that experience like for you? And did you tell people right away? How did that really expose itself?
Yeah. For me, like, I just come from that, and that is a good basis that I did have growing up, was my small town hometown church. We're a non-denominational Christian Missionary Alliance church. I don't know if you ever heard of CMA, but they're just a non-denominational church. And
Okay.
honestly, that was one of the areas that I did have a lot of good structure that I really loved and enjoyed. A lot of really good people. in my church that just loved on me, didn't ever judge me, didn't ever put me down, didn't ever talk behind my back. A lot of good older people that were like always praying for me, and I could feel those prayers a lot of the times, honestly.
Yeah.
And when I would come home to visit, like, Collin, how you doing? You know, we've been thinking about you. These people would send me letters in the mail, send me gifts. You know, like
That's
these
awesome to
people
hear. Yeah.
loved and cared about me deeply. So I did, like, I opened up about it right away. Like I didn't have any shame in it. Like, you know, I know some Christians would have shame in that situation, but I don't know, just being who I am and where I was at that point, I was like, well, I'm having a kid. And I don't remember anybody ever looking down on me or ever saying like, oh, you're going to be a good dad. You're going to, you know, you're going to work on this. You're going to, you
Yeah.
know, we'll see what happens with you and Christina at that point, you know, like you start working on yourself, you know, see what happens, you know.
That's cool. Yeah.
So it was good. It was a good, like, it was a good, you know, things were good in that sense. Honestly, I feel like a lot of people were probably praying for me. Knowing my mom, she probably had me on the church prayer list for everybody praying for me.
Sure. Yeah.
So that probably is what has helped me in this life so far from that point forward. So
Without a doubt. Yeah.
to be honest with you, but yeah, that's really interesting, you know, because there is some churches where, you know, you'd probably be judged or condemned from that church, or like, you're not allowed to come back here or whatever. And fortunately, like, just the Bible believing church that I was part of, you know, just very loving, very kind. Now, yeah, I think there was some people in that church who could have easily went to me and said, man, you know, that's not the right way to go about things. And well, I already kind of knew that, you know what I mean? Like, cause I was raised in the church. I already knew that I was in the wrong in that sense and what God wants me to do. So I think the people around me already knew I knew that. So
Sure.
I was, you know, that's why they just loved on me. So
Yeah. Right on, man. Well, what was it like once your daughter was born? I mean, did that make things worse between you and Christina for a time, or was it, hey, refreshing just to have someone by your side at that point? And it sounds as if this is one of the first times where you were really, other than your business, it seems like this is the place where you first step in and said, no, this is something I believe in and I want to do. Not trying to put words in your mouth here, but I feel that in this conversation here.
Yeah. Yeah. It was really the first time that I actually had something like where I fell on my face, first of all, like really fell on my face. So that was like, whoa, like this is one of those life-changing moments, like where you fall on your face and it's like, all right, it's time to like get back up and like, what's your choice going to be? What are you going to do? You can either go left or you can go right. You know what I mean? So I decided to go right. And, you know, and for me, that looked like, hey, it's time to level up. It's time to grow up. It's time to, you know, become hopefully a good dad and do whatever it takes to become a good dad. So this was a life-changing moment for me. That's why I brought it up in the first place. Like most podcasts I come on, we don't talk about this. You know, I have with a few, but I think it is a pivotal part of my story, you know, because it's helped me explore, you know, some of those things I had to go back and realize, and those wounds I've had to work on. But as I've moved forward, like Christina and she was totally turned off by me. She didn't want to be with me. She was just trying to be nice. And her mom was really encouraging her to like, hey, give this guy a chance. Like, we see some really good things in Collin. I think he's a good man. I think he's going to become a really good man. And thank God for Liz, my mother-in-law, and my father-in-law, Tim. Like they were on my side. And it was kind of crazy because you could have easily had your in-laws. Well, they weren't my in-laws then. You could have easily had those people who were not my in-laws not be on my side. Like, Christina, you should never let this guy see the kid. You should never, you know what I mean? It could have easily been that way, but they were inviting, they were loving, they were caring. They showed the love of Christ in that way. And they said, Collin, we want you to be in the room during the, you know, when the baby's delivered, we want you there. We want you to be part of this. So Liz had called me up and said, you better get here in a couple hours. Like, this is going down.
Wow.
And then from that,
talk about a birth story.
yeah. Dude, it's crazy to think back to it on it. It wasn't, I mean, it was really not that long. It was 7. My daughter's going to be 7 in February.
Man.
February. So
yeah, that's not that long ago.
It's really not that long ago if you think about it, but a lot has changed in that time, of course, for the better. But yeah, Christina didn't want me to. She hated that I was in there. She hated that I was in San Antonio because I had lived like 3.5 hours away is where I had lived. And pretty much I told her that night, I said, I drove home the next day after, or 2 days later when she got let out of the hospital. And I said, well, I got to go home, recollect myself. All my stuff is at home. I basically brought a couple pairs of clothes, for the trip to the hospital and stuff. And I stayed around for, as long as I could, of course,
Yeah.
to spend time with my child. And I could definitely feel adversity in that moment. Like she didn't want me there, but her mom was encouraging her to let me stay there, and those kinds of things. And thank God for that again. But I went home and I just remember bawling my eyes out thinking, man, what did I do? I really screwed up. Like this is a special child. This is a special woman. I just watched her give birth to my child. Like this is man, like I really messed up here. Like it's time to really bear down and like make some changes in my life. And from that point forward, literally, I looked at business differently. I looked at my life differently. I looked at like what my path was going to be moving forward. And I said, you know what, I got to get to San Antonio. I don't know if I have to sell my stuff. What do I do? Luckily my business was all online, so I could run it from anywhere.
Okay.
I did have a few remote employees. I was running a website at that time called Outdoor Overload. And it was we were really successful. We were getting a couple million people a month to the website, doing really well with ads and those kinds of things. And I had a couple guys that were working for me remotely, a social media guy, or a few writers, those kinds of things.
Okay.
And basically it was kind of a small shop, and we were having some fun doing what we were doing. But, everything changed in that moment. It's like, man, business isn't important anymore. It's time to like be a dad, but it's also time to figure out what's going on with this relationship, or if there is even a relationship here with my wife. And with my wife now, of course, everybody knows the story already.
Yeah.
But I've already given it away. But in that moment, it was pivotal, man. It was like, all right, time to start making some changes and doing what I have to do. And so Christina invited me to come stay actually where we are living right now. We're living in our the guest house at my in-laws ranch.
Wow,
We sold our house a couple of years ago during COVID. And so we're living here. We're kind of riding the wave right now, the housing market wave, like a lot of people. So we're living in the house that we literally lived in after that birth. And because that's where she was living at the time. And she said, you can stay in the guest room. That's where you stay. And you can watch the baby during the day when I go to school, because she was in college at that time. She was working on her master's degree. And I was like, cool, I'll do that. And so basically I'd wake up every morning, make her breakfast, get my workout in, do my thing. So I would take care of Sophia, work on my stuff while I was taking care of her. She'd be off at school all day at college, and then she'd come home. I'd have supper ready for her, and she'd kind of resume her, her stuff, her side of the deal, so I could kind of do my thing. And that's when I'd go in my room and like just have my own time, because taking care of a baby all day is not easy when you're a new dad. It's
not at all.
Changing diapers, feeding the baby, those kinds of things, man. It was fast right away. And I wanted Christina to be able to do what she wanted to do too, because she really wanted to get her master's degree at that point in time. So man, it was crazy, man. But for that first 6 months, I was literally, that's what I was doing for 6 months, just trying to figure myself out, just trying to be there for her, show her that, man, I'm a different guy than what you realize. Like I'm a good guy. Like I'm gonna be here. I'm not gonna leave you or whatever. Like I'm in this now. Like, and gradually and slowly, like I said, hey, can we go on a date one night? I asked her if we could go on a real date and like go out. And so we started going on some dates. We started having these deeper conversations. And long story short, we fell back in love. And not that you fall out of love. I think there was love there, but there was just a lot of resentment for what I had done.
Yeah. Well said.
In that point. And I think she realized, I think my mom is right, and I think my dad is right. This guy is better than I think he is. He's not the guy who's just going to leave me on the street and abandon me. Like he's in this. Obviously, he showed me like he's here. He's taking care of us. I was buying all the groceries. I was doing all the stuff I had to do, like authentically, like because I knew that was where I needed to be. You know what I mean? I wasn't just trying to play this out just to have my child. Like I really wanted this,
Yeah.
And it's cool, man. We ended up getting married later that year in October. and during hunting season.
Oh,
But hey,
I'm one of those too.
you got to do what you got to do. You know what I mean? So I had to lock that down, and
That's
thank
right.
God thank God I did.
I have a peak anniversary.
Okay, I'm not that bad. Mine's at the beginning of October
uh,
1st, beginning of hunting season.
Okay,
So
no, I'm a peak rut guy. Man, there's so many like themes that just draw out in that one that strikes me, and it is so worth noting, and you highlighted it, is just the family unit and that extended family, and what parents mean to kids, and how important it is to have elders, and in this case being the parents, being able to speak into it, and then for
yep.
you all to, whether you felt it at the time, be able to humble yourselves enough to take those suggestions or maybe
Yeah.
those gentle nudges, and and let these things happen and say, hey, there's wisdom in this. I don't necessarily understand it,
Yeah.
but I'm going to get behind it. And I know there's a lot to that, but it really makes me think of how important, when we look at the breakdown of society and things going on, and the extended family that is so many times not a
Yeah.
part of the individual
Hmm.
decision. It's crucial. We don't always get along with our parents or our in-laws, or but that's okay. It doesn't mean that there's not wisdom that you can glean value from, and
Correct.
it's
Yep.
overlooked a lot, I think, just because of our culture, our Western culture, where we are so, once we have that family unit, we just want autonomy, and we don't want to rely on the wisdom of elders anymore.
Yeah, and I really have a lot of appreciation for my family, even though my family is up north and they're thousands of miles, a few thousand miles away or whatever. Like, I love my family greatly. I wish I could spend more time with them, but thank God I do have the support in the family that I have here in Texas with my in-laws. They're awesome people. You know, we don't always get along, but that's just how things
That's
go.
okay.
But
Yeah.
there's a lot of mutual love there, and a lot of respect for each other, and they have become mentors to me. They have helped me learn, and they've come alongside me and supported me in ways that that family should. And they didn't have to do that. It wasn't expected of them to do that, but they did do that. And I really thank God for that. And it's really helped my relationship with my wife, because going, obviously it started out very rough with the way it started out, but from there it still stayed rough, because we had both had a lot of pain, a lot of issues, a lot of things we had to work on. Now you add a child to that, you
Yeah.
add a young marriage to that, you add another child to that within the next year. and and at that time I also ended up selling my business to my competition.
Okay.
They bought me out, and so I kind of like lost my purpose, which my purpose was my business at that point. So I
Mm-hmm.
was like a little lost myself in that, and I was really dialed in and focused on being a dad, but I was more focused still at that time on myself too, a lot, because of my business and because I was an entrepreneur, and that's who I was. How people knew Collin.
Yeah.
He's this marketing guy, he's this business guy. Like, he's young, he's a go getter, like he gets after it, he's a grinder. One of those kind of things. He knows a lot of people. All those things that were my value at that time. And it's kind of interesting to look back to that and like,
Yeah.
man, I've had to make a lot of change.
Mm-hmm.
I've had to humble myself. Otherwise, I wouldn't be where I'm at right now, of course. I'd be down a way different path. Um,
Yeah.
but
You.
having that family unit as part of that has been a wonderful thing, and I'm so grateful for that.
Yeah. Well, you were doing so many right things, and whether it was perfectly intentional, or it was just like a floundering. This is the only thing I know to do. Maybe there's some of both in there, but you were doing the right things, and it sounds like, and maybe at times it'd be interesting to talk to Christina and both of you on a podcast together.
That'd be fun.
That would, just her understanding of having to see you do the work. Um, and because it's easy at that point to say, hey, you see what I'm doing for you? You see what I'm doing for you? And then that resentment, animosity can continue. I think that happens a lot in relationships, whether
Yes.
it's an early dating relationship, or whether it's a struggling marriage, or whether it's a new marriage. It's
Yep. Of
you want to be seen for what you're doing for the other person, rather
course.
than put your head down and just do it.
Just
And
do it.
because that's love, right?
Yep.
That's the moment you are doing it because that is the thing to do, even though you're not getting the feedback maybe you want from it
Yep.
in that moment. And you ride out the duration. And it sounds like you did that because so many people give up. It's like so they
Yes.
start doing the right thing, but they're not getting the instant feedback, instant gratification. And
Yeah.
then it's slowly,
I definitely wasn't getting the feedback either because there was still there. I mean, there still was some resentment there on Christina's side, and I can't blame her for that. Like, you know, like I, I left her, or we left, we broke up, and like I wasn't present for 8 months leading up to she's growing big with this belly and stuff, and she doesn't
yeah.
have anybody to support or take care of her, and like that's horrible, and then after that, like obviously I'm doing all this work, I'm working on myself, I'm trying to figure things out where I'm going to go, like we're talking about. And my love language is the feedback, because in business, in sports, in all these other things in my life, I've always had that instant feedback and gratification of you're doing good, you're having
Yeah.
success, you know what I mean? And all of a sudden I wasn't having that for a long, for I guess for me at that point it felt like a long time, 6 months.
Yeah.
You know, in that situation it felt like a long time anyway. But then it finally did come, and I was like, oh, like it was like a sigh of relief, like all right, like I'm getting somewhere with this whole deal. Like this isn't for nothing. And it wasn't, and I knew at that point it wasn't like that I wasn't just doing it for show, just to get, like I said, get my child back, or
Right.
spend time with my child, or get her back or whatever. I knew I there was something inside of me that knew, like, all right, you got to work on yourself, like, because this isn't just about you anymore, like it's about more than you. You no matter what, you're going to have this child for the rest of your life. So I had that to work towards, and that was going to be my success. That was going to be what what I saw on the other side of things.
Yeah. So once reconciliation and really restoration came to your relationship and you guys are married, and what was it like to set new goals for yourself? Because I can only imagine it's like you went through that stage of dating, being together, you have a child, you go through this, drawn out, very painful, I'm sure at times, relationship, you grow back together, and then now you sold a business, you're trying to
Figure
I
out
don't know, like
life a little
kickstart
bit.
life again, right?
Yeah.
So how did that communication? What were kind of some of the steps that you all took to
Yeah.
reestablish yourself as this is our life now?
Yeah. Yeah. We were both in it, and then, obviously we got married, and we were like, all right, we're in this. And, for me, it was like, I just needed to continue working on myself. I sold my business, had a little bit of money in the bank because of that, thank God. And
Hmm.
we ended up moving up out to Colorado, because I was going to take a job with actually the Outdoor Channel, doing some marketing stuff for them.
Right on.
That job, we moved out there, and that job actually fell through after we moved out there, which was
Whew.
super painful. So were out there for like 3 months, ended up having to move back. And she's like, and we're like, we were spending a lot of money in that move, and like getting out there and renting and those kinds of things. And it's like, all right, we got to get back. We got to get back to Texas. We got to get reestablished here, and I've got to find a job or whatever I got to do, to provide for my family. And we got to figure out like what we're going to do moving forward. And Christina at that point decided, she had already decided, like, I'm not going to finish going to school. Like, I think I'm meant to be a stay-at-home mom. Like,
Wow.
that was something we had kind of talked about. She'd
Yeah.
always had this heart for like wanting to stay home with the kids. And she was pregnant with our second child during that transition period, because we got pregnant basically right after we got married. She got
Okay.
pregnant again with our second child. So it was like, all right, it's us and our two kids, and it's time to go down this path and figure this out. So we had, honestly, I don't think we had any goals at that point. It was like, just make it through. just to be
Survive.
just to be totally honest, it was like, just to
Yeah.
survive. Like, we were still trying to deal with a lot of our own personal issues between us, and then our own marriage issues, like trying to figure out who we are, and then trying to go back, like I said, and kind of work on those different wounds that we had. She had her own wounds that she had to work on, and I had some of my own wounds. And then so it's kind of a crazy time to think about that. And really, we didn't have a path or a plan, but we just kind of started working on ourselves. And really, for me, it was I kind of had to start leading the way and working on myself, and for her to like kind of get on board and continue to like start to do the same thing for herself.
Yeah.
I honestly have had a lot more work to do on myself compared to her too. So I feel like I have anyway. I feel like I've had to level up a lot more in my life,
Sure.
compared to her. So I don't know, maybe not, but I feel like I have. But really, we started to. So we moved back to Texas. We're kind of getting reestablished here. We lived in the San Antonio area here for a little bit. Then I ended up getting a pretty steady job, an online position, doing some customer support and sales stuff for an online company, and that was going really well. We were like, some of our first goals were like, hey, let's get debt free. Let's start working on some of these little things here that are financially going to set us free, so we can kind of do what we want to do with our life. So that was some of the stuff we were working on. And we decided to buy a house up in North Texas and move away from here, which I am not obviously a city guy. And if you know San Antonio, it's 2 million people. It's huge. It's super spread out, a lot going on here. I didn't really particularly like it here. I still don't necessarily like being here. I'm making the best of it while I'm here. There's a lot of resources, a lot of good things going on. But I was like, we need to get to a small town. And my hunting lease and what I knew was back up in North Central Texas. So we ended up buying a house there, and which was good for us. So that was kind of like our first real major goal, was like getting debt free, or working towards getting debt free, and then buying a house so we could kind of establish ourselves as a family.
Right.
So we did that. And that honestly was good, but it was also like, all right, now the in-laws aren't here. Her mom and dad aren't here. We don't have any family around us. We don't really have anybody around us that we knew. We kind of moved to an area we didn't really know a lot of people. So thank God I knew inside of me, like, we need to start going to a local church. So that was kind of the first thing we did. We started going to a local church there,
right on,
which was super awesome. That really helped us a lot. But a lot of our issues started to come out there, because there was nobody around us guiding us. It was just us, just the kids. And we started arguing a lot. We started, there was a lot of stuff going on. Just a lot of those resentment, a lot of those things that we, from the past were starting to come back out.
Okay.
We had a lot of things to work on, man. And, thank God we were in this local church, and they had suggested like a good, counselor for us to go see.
Right
and
on.
Being that I am a Christian, and not that I've lived it perfectly and was living it out perfectly, or ever have been living it out perfectly, I knew that I needed to do that. I knew that, like, that's something we need to do. We need to work on these issues. There's some deeper issues here between us individually, but also in our relationship. So let's work on this. Like, let's give this our best shot, at least for our kids. And so that's what we did. We started going to a counselor. This was this was before COVID. So this was what, I guess 4 years ago now. And we started going to that counselor, Greg. He was an amazing man, married 40 years, super, just a great mentor, spoke into our lives in the right ways, really, spoke to us softly and lovingly and care, in a caring way, but also very sternly. And here's what God's word says about how relationships work. And this is how your representation of your relationship and your marriage is of God, and how he loves us, and we're like, man, we're going through this thing. Like, I remember there was times where we were there, we didn't want to look at each other. We were like yelling at each other walking in, but man, we kept going for, I don't know how long. We went for a while, 6 months, 8 months or something like that, until COVID had hit.
Okay.
And thank God we did that, because we went through that process, and that's when real reconciliation started to happen. We started to really get some tools around us to understand, like, we're in this together. We're a team. We gotta fight this battle. It's not just a battle between us anymore. Like, this is a deeper battle. Like, I believe it's a spiritual battle. We truly believe that.
Yeah.
And
do you
so
some of I'm sorry to interrupt it,
no,
but
no.
when you bring up those tools that you speak of, did that come around just learning conflict and how to speak, how to listen, some of those just techniques that are so important to what is that kind of what you're driving at there?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Like how to have respect for it, just simple as having respect for each other and talking to each other calmly. And like, I'm still, one of my biggest struggles is like, I have a little bit of anger in me. I have a little bit of, like, I can fly off the handle pretty quick. You know what I mean? And so that was one of the things, like, man, you need to be softer, you need to be, you need to be kinder, you need to talk to your wife better, you know what I mean? This is what God calls us to do. And then this is how you actually, if you do go through an argument, this is how you do it, this is how you reconcile, and this is how you forgive each other, and this is how you move forward after that, a
Yeah.
lot of
Right on.
those kinds of things. Yeah.
Right.
And I just didn't have, so this kind of getting back to how I was raised, I just never really, had a lot of people come around me and teach me a lot of these kinds of things, maybe how to treat a woman, maybe how to, reconcile in certain ways, like, I think I saw it in the church a little bit, but
Hmm.
some of it was like kind of closed off to me too. Wasn't focused on it. I wasn't thinking about it. I wasn't having somebody like really show me that, like a dad or a father figure or a grandpa, like, hey, this is my wife, and this is how you should treat your wife. You know what I
Yeah.
mean?
Yeah.
And so I just didn't have that model to me, I guess. And now I think about that and I'm like, man, I want to make sure I model this right for my kids, because they're watching everything I
Yeah.
do. I mean, I can see it every day. Like, they're really paying attention. And so now I'm really thinking on a deeper level, like, how do I model this love and kindness? And, as a
Did they see
Christian,
me just screw up?
yeah, yeah, a lot.
Yeah.
But so yeah, there was a lot of those tools that we were learning. We were putting those in our tool bag, and like, now we have those, and now we can use those. And we were, we had that wisdom around us to teach us those things. And thank God we had that, because, man, going into COVID, like, dude, we would have tore each other apart.
Mm.
It would have been really bad. I mean,
Yeah.
and I know I've heard some stories, man. COVID was not good for marriages, a lot of
No, it wasn't.
marriages.
It wasn't.
And it really brought out a lot of the bad stuff for a lot of people, because now you're locked together for months on end. And thank God that we had been through a lot of that, and worked on a lot of those issues at that point, leading up to that point. And that really helped us. And that really got us down this path where we started looking at things as you and I, like us as a team, like, this is
Yeah.
us, we're in this together. We have goals and aspirations and things that we want to do moving forward. And so we were still working on getting debt free. We were still thinking about, like, I was one of those guys, as an entrepreneurial mind, like, I have this drive, like, what's my next business? What am I doing?
Yeah.
What am I going to do? We're still young, only in our, early 30s. So we got a lot of life ahead of us,
For
obviously. So
sure.
let's start working on these things, and like do this together as a team.
Yeah. No, I hear that coming out. Well, is that the point where you really start exploring the company and the companies that you're at now, or was there, and what was her influence over how you pursue that? Was that her encouraging you to go do those things? Was it you presenting those things? Because as you're starting to make that combined vision for your lives,
Yep.
how were some of those conversations? And you can get into kind of some of the things you're doing now would be phenomenal.
Yeah. My wife has always, honestly, one of the coolest things about Christina is she has always supported me in my entrepreneurial side. She has always trusted that I was going to just figure it out and make ends meet, whatever that looked like.
Because
She
there's a lot of
trusted that.
risk. There's
So
a lot of risk.
there is a lot of risk in business, as you probably know as well. And, it's like, she was like, all right, you figure it out. You do what you have to do. So I was working for that other software company, doing that. And we, I was getting the mortgage pay. Bills were paid. Everything was good there. We were actually working towards getting debt free. Well, then COVID hits, and we're like, whoa, what's going on? You're like life is upside down now. So we're just kind of riding out the storm in that sense for the first, I remember, a few 4, 5, 6 months. And we started to look at the housing market. And Tim, my father-in-law, he's super smart with this kind of stuff. He's invested in a lot of stuff. He does a lot of stock market
Yeah.
type stuff. He's been a business owner, very
Good
wise,
guy to consult.
great guy. He's the one who told me to buy the house in the first place, because he's like, if you buy this house now, like in 5 to 10 years, like, you're gonna get a really good return. So that just happened to happen a lot quicker. It happened in 2 years. You know what I mean?
Hmm.
And so we were thinking about that. We're like, man, if we can make this money from this sale, like, it's gonna put us like debt free, like right there at debt free, other than like one college loan left. We're gonna be right there. You know what I
Hey,
mean?
good for you guys.
And
Yeah.
and so we were pretty much debt free, other than one college loan. and which was just freeing in itself in that way, going down I'm sure you're familiar with Dave Ramsey by chance.
Absolutely. Yeah.
And that's
Work
kind
it,
of,
work those baby steps.
yeah, and that's kind of what we were doing. We were working that, and so we sold our house, and that really helped us. And Liz was like, well, you guys can move up back out here to the guest house at the ranch. It's a nice 2-bedroom trailer house. And I'm like, man, okay.
Here we go.
So here we go. So that transition was really interesting. But through that, like I was starting to, I was starting to get my entrepreneurial spirit back, like just from that kind of stuff happening, and us feeling better about where we were in life. Like, man, like we have a little more wiggle room, like maybe to actually start a business. So that's where I started to kind of save up some money and like start thinking about like new ideas for businesses. I mean, I had been thinking about different ideas, always thinking about ideas, but I just wasn't in the right place. I had that goal set where we had to get that wiggle room. We had to get that little bit of space where we could actually feel like we could do something else outside of the job that I was doing, which I didn't like at all. I'm not a job guy. So yeah, that goal was fulfilled, and obviously that was huge. We weren't debt free, so the goal wasn't actually fulfilled, but we were close enough where we were like, all right, we feel good about this. And my wife was like, hey, if you want to quit your job and you want to have enough money saved up and you want to maybe do some consulting on the side, because I still do a little bit of marketing consulting with different companies, kind of on the side. That's kind of what I do still. And I didn't mention this, Steve, before in my story, but I mentioned I've been doing marketing, but I had an agency for a few years before I started my website, and that was really successful in the hunting space. That's really where I met a lot of contacts. I made a lot of, I had a lot of great clients, did really well. And that was awesome. So I've been in this industry now for like 15 years. And so it was like, all right.
Was that mostly in like content creation, or was it more advising individual clients for things, or?
I'll kind of tell that story. We got plenty of time here. So I'll just tell the story, man. Like, so basically after 2009, 2010, the market had, 2008, 2009, the market crashed, of course, with everything that happened there.
Yeah.
2010, 2011, I was kind of finishing up college. Actually, was dropping out of college, to be honest.
Okay.
I played a couple years of college football, and I was like, man, my business is growing. Like, do I keep going to school, paying all this private school money, or do I like go off and like do this business?
Yeah.
So that's where I started doing a lot more consulting. And then from there, it grew into, I met another guy who was like, hey, we should go into business and start this agency. Okay. So we hit it at the right time where I was just like a social media marketing guru. Like I understood how algorithms work. I understood how Facebook worked. Facebook was the go-to place at that time.
Yeah.
And a lot of these marketing guys had either gotten fired, or they were like, man, to keep my job, I got to figure something out here where I can start spending my ad money and my advertising dollars, like, because magazines aren't working anymore and TV is starting to dwindle a little bit,
Yeah.
So they're like, this digital thing, like there might be something here. I was like, yeah, I've been saying this for 3 years. So it's a lot of these contacts I had made. Yeah, and I had a lot of guys, in 2008, 2009, 2010 were like, nah, that'll never, digital will never be where people go. And I had a lot of these guys come back to me and say, you were right, which was kind of cool. And so we started this. Yeah. So we started this agency, and really our focus was digital marketing. And like, there was nobody in the hunting space doing this, and specifically a lot of the companies we worked with were bow hunting related companies. Okay. That's kind of where I had my relationships. I built my relationships in the industry. And, so we quickly, like, my business partner was super savvy with sales. Like, he was a sales guy. I was the guy behind the scenes, doing content, understood how to post at the right times, what to post, how it all worked, how to collaborate with our clients to have their photographers and their team build out this, this content. So we were like the original company that was doing that. Like, it was just a 2-man team. Then we hired a couple guys. I think we ended up getting up to 5 guys total in the office, which was kind of cool. And we did that for 3 or 4 years. And man, we had some awesome clients. We worked with some great guys. Ted Nugent was one of, not to name drop, but Ted
No, no,
Nugent was one
no.
of my
Yeah,
clients.
that's awesome, man.
Cameron Haynes was one of my clients. Like we worked with a ton of great companies and stuff like that.
Yeah.
Like we were at the top of the world. Like it was like, whoa, like these young guys are getting after it,
Yeah.
and like kind of going later into my story, like I've talked about, like that's what I was really riding on, like that who I was built into like what I had built in my marketing business and then into my website business. So,
Okay.
it's kind of interesting, but
Yeah, for sure.
what were we talking about because of that story or where that was going?
So we were just getting into kind of at that point, you guys had this shared vision, you and your wife, and you were moving into something new, and what was that going to look like? Is where we were going.
Yeah. So I had those relationships tapped into, and I kind of had started to figure out, like, I know that I want to be in this digital space because I have a lot of skills, a lot of talents in that. I've got a lot of connections in that. So I ended up I had a podcast that I had started. It was called Activate the Hunt, which I think is still out there. I only did like 10 or 11 episodes, which I love doing it.
Yeah.
I just wasn't like on the resources side. Like I just didn't stick with it. I didn't keep going on it. And like as an entrepreneur, like we get all these ideas, but then like some of them stick and some of them don't. And I was like, no, this isn't my calling right now. This isn't where I'm supposed to be. So I kind of backed away from that. I was still working with some clients, doing some different consulting stuff. And then I was like, I started thinking about, like what else could I do, and I started doing some guiding some hunts for some different ranches here in Texas, like, because that was one way I was going to make ends meet. Plus I love hunting. I love being in the outdoors. So I had these different relationships come where guys were like, hey, you want to come guide for me? Like you want to come help me, guide my hunters at some of these big ranches. So I started doing that on the side. And I started kind of thinking about, man, the old school hunting, camps. Like when I was growing up, I didn't get into this, obviously, my early story, but growing up, like some of my earliest memories are in hunting camp with my aunts, my uncles, my dad, that side of my family, my cousins, sitting around the campfire, just like telling stories or lies. I mean,
that sounds more accurate.
Eating good food, like, just enjoying that time with family and camaraderie. And that's a great memory in my life. Like that is actually one of the best memories with my dad. And what he has actually taught me was hunting and being in the woods and woodsmanship and spending time in the outdoors and nature and those kinds of things, and how to treat animals with respect and how to provide for yourself. Those are all things that my dad did teach me, which is so awesome. For sure. And that was what he was super passionate about that. So I started thinking about that, like, man, like I like guiding and I like being in these camp with these different guys because I'm a people person and I like meeting new people and it's really great. But, like some of these camps were drinking beer and some guys are cussing and swearing and kind of carrying on and talking about different things that I don't really care about. It's like, I kind of want to have a little more control over like who's in my camp, like who am I spending time with? So some of these ideas started to come like, oh, I could start my own outfitter service, but people still buy your hunts. Well, I could start like a guiding service where it's like for high caliber guys, like guys who are like working on this stuff like I am, like, because I've been obviously through this stage of where, I went through marriage counseling. And then from there, when we moved here, I really started to heavily get into my physical fitness because that was where I was lacking, and after COVID, I remember looking in the mirror one day thinking, man, like I got pretty big. Like I put on like 50 pounds after COVID.
Yeah.
I was 200. I mean, I'm a big guy. I'm 6'3". I always stay around 230, 240. Like I said, I was a college football player. I was a lineman, D lineman, big guy, strong guy, but I got big, I was way too big for my frame. And, I remember looking at myself in the mirror. I was like, man, like I got to change here. Like I feel a little depression coming on. Like I've got my third child on the way. Like it's time to level up. If I actually want to build a business and have credibility and want to have influence over people, like I got to live it out. I've got to take action on my life, not just in my marriage, not just, my family, my kids. Like I've got to do this to everybody. I got to do this at every part of my life. Yeah. And so that's kind of where things really changed, man. This was 2000 early 2021, January 2021. And that's when the little switch inside of my brain really turned on and said, all right, it's time to level up, Collin. It's time to take this to a next level. And it's going to start by your physical fitness. Like, if you can't even take care of your body, like, how can you take care of running a business right? How can you take care of, your wife really in the right way? How can you take care of the, potential employees, whatever? A
Yeah.
lot of these different things. I think there's a lot of people that, honestly, people have a lot of respect for people who take care of themselves and are accountable to what they do, who do what they say and say what they do.
Right.
And I wasn't being, like I mentioned earlier in the podcast, like, that's not who I was being. Like, I wasn't doing a good job of that in
Yeah.
my life, and I had to change that. So that's where, like, I started leveling up. And even though I had these business ideas and things, I was kind of focused more just on my consulting. So I was still working
Yeah.
for myself, but it wasn't where I want to be, obviously. And,
Mm-hmm.
I started leveling up in my fitness. I started working out. I hired some coaches, got mentors around me. Thank God. I started to, have a church group of men that I met with at that point. Like a band of brothers, basically.
Yeah.
I started being part of or I had friends who were in some online communities that were of men, those kinds of things. I'm sure you're familiar with kind of the men's space has grown a lot in that area, which is
For
great.
sure.
I love it.
Yeah, it's
Um,
awesome.
a lot of great stuff happening in that. And it just really brought a lot of the right people around me. And that honestly is what changed my life. People started coming around me, and it was high caliber people who are real with me.
Yeah.
People who are said, you know what, Collin, you're a little overweight. You need to start working out. Or, man, like, I see you talk about these things, but when I hang out with you, you're not doing any of those things. Like, that's not who you really are. Like, you can change that,
Mm.
So they weren't just putting me down. They were actually saying, like, hey, you can take action on this.
No,
So
it
that
comes
was
from a
real.
good place. Yeah.
Yeah, it was coming from a good place. It was good people. It was high caliber guys who were like, man, you have a lot of talent, you have a lot of skill, you have a lot of good things going for you, a lot of good things that could happen in your life. You've got to turn this on, and you've got to really start getting after that. So that's what I did, man. And from there, like, it just, as you know, I know you're a high caliber guy, Steve, yourself, man. You're podcasting, you're working hard, you do a high level, high stress job, you're a family guy. In that, like, you start to surround yourself with other guys in those areas,
Yeah.
and it just gets addicting to you, like, in a
Mm-hmm.
good kind of addicting way. It becomes your lifestyle, it
Sure.
becomes who you are. You always want to continue to grow, and because, like, it just doesn't stop. Like, there's always another level. Like, I just don't feel like I'm ever going to hit the top of the mountain. I think it's always going to be a climb. There's going to be some plateaus in there where you enjoy some moments, I'm sure, but I feel like it's not a bad climb either. Like, it's a good climb. It's one of those climbs, like,
Yeah.
where you're in shape and you're enjoying it. Like, this is awesome,
Yeah.
and not saying there's not rocky road, and like I said, times in there where it's a grind and it's tough, because there has been, and there is. And
Yeah.
just even over the last few weeks, there has been some moments of like, whoa, what's going on here, man? I don't know who I am. You know what I mean?
Well,
Like,
look, I mean, spurred something in my mind just thinking about that. It's like what we're talking about is discomfort in the end, but it's like discomfort isn't always painful. I think a lot of times maybe that's misrepresented. It's like, man, we you just got to get uncomfortable, and it's gonna suck, and it's just not. You hear all this stuff around that, but it's not always painful. It can become normative that, like, it's hard, it's difficult. I could, if I did something else right now in this moment, it would be much more comfortable. This isn't gonna hurt me, but it goes back to what you were saying earlier with your relationship stuff. It's the thing that I know I need to be doing right now
yep,
to ultimately arrive at where I need to be.
yep.
It is easier to just go to bed tonight without working out. It is tonight. I gave myself the excuse. I said, "Oh, I got a podcast late. I don't have time to do an hour workout, so I'm not." Dude, at freaking 8:35, I ran downstairs. I was like, "It doesn't matter how much I get done. I'm gonna do this because
Yep,
I wouldn't have done that in however many months ago.
yep.
It was easy to escape that, and it wasn't painful for me to go do that.
Mm-mm.
But it was that little victory, that little win that I hear you talking about, and we give a lot of like mental assent to that. It's like we know that's the right thing, but until you like start repeating that process
Yeah.
over and over and over again, it doesn't feel good right away. But it's
Yeah.
crazy. Every intense workout is just not always that painful anymore.
Yeah.
It's not. And
Yeah.
so we do other things to create
Yeah.
that more
Yeah. Exactly.
adversity. But it
Exactly.
doesn't have to be as scary as sometimes I think we make it sound.
Of course, of course. And I can tell you, like, in my journey over the last couple of years, and just to give people context, like, I was 290 pounds and now I weigh 208, I think, pounds this morning or something like that. So
Good for
I've
you,
lost
brother.
over
Yeah,
80 pounds in 2 years.
it's
And,
awesome.
and, I got after it. I stopped making excuses, and I had some painful moments, of course, because it's tough. It's not easy.
Yeah.
But I didn't make the excuses. I literally went to work on myself, and I said, I'm gonna do this. And I didn't stop. I hired coaches. I got the right people around me. I had got the resources around me that I needed. Whatever. I did whatever I had to do to get to that point. But I also didn't just jump into it in a way where it's like, all right, I got to do this, 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 and this, and I think a lot of guys do that. Like they try to do all these changes at one time,
Yeah.
but just for who I am and like what, just the life I lived up to that point. Like I knew like, no, that's just not going to work for me. Like I got to ease into this a little bit and just start, making small changes and work my way up. So,
Yeah. Let it compound. Yeah.
yeah, let it compound. And honestly, like kind of part of that journey of understanding that was actually the baby steps. I started thinking about things in that way, taking those baby steps, not just in a financial sense, but physical, mental, emotional, spiritual, like all these different ways. So man, Dave, you're onto something there, I think.
How about it? How about it?
How about that? But no, man. So, it started with a 1 hour workout, 5 days a week, which my goal was like, if I can get 20 days of working out in, like, that'll be cool. Like that's way more than what I was doing. I hadn't worked out for a year, I think, at that point, you know? And then after that first month, I'm like, man, I did really good here. Like I got 21 days of working out in, man, like
And
this
you
is
start to
awesome.
see the changes.
Yeah.
And it
Well, yeah,
feels
you
good.
lose a couple pounds and you're like, man, well, what else can I do here now? Like I feel
Yeah.
good. I don't feel sore after my workouts as much anymore. Like the
Mhm.
pain's kind of going away a little bit. And then I started, I was like, all right, I need to start getting in the gym more, or I need to start taking my lifts to the next level.
Mhm.
I need to start taking my nutrition to the next level. So that's when I started looking at like, oh, maybe I should hire a coach,
Yeah.
to
No,
help me
there's an
with some of that.
education piece is real for that.
Correct. Yeah. Like, and I did have some background in some of that, being a college athlete. Like I kind of understood how to eat, but I kind of didn't always understand. Like part of it was there, but part of it was like, still like, man, how do I do this exactly? What are my macros supposed to be? Where am I supposed to be at exactly? So I did. I dropped some coin, a good chunk of it, and hired a really good coach who mentored me. And honestly, on the next level, he held me accountable. That was really, it was,
Yeah.
there's some psychology behind it. I don't remember what the principle is, but there's like a principle behind, like when somebody's looking over your shoulder while you're doing something, you have a lot more success when you know that. So that's partially what it was too. Really, that investment was like, hey, I'm putting some skin in the game. First of all, like that kind of hurts if I blow this off, my wife is gonna, like, because we were on this, like this journey of like, like trying to get debt free.
Yeah.
And if I have to look my wife in the eyes and say, yeah, I just blew that money on a workout or on a routine that I didn't follow through on, a
Right.
nutrition plan and a workout routine, like my wife was going to kill me. That's
Right.
what I thought.
What
but
part of that
she-
is irresponsible? Is it irresponsible to spend the money? Is it irresponsible to spend the money and not actually benefit from it? And so
exactly. So it changed my mindset about things in that way. And I was like, all right, now I'm on the next step. Like I've got this workout routine. I'm eating right. What can I do next? Well, I need to get more. I need to start, going for more runs, or I need to start doing something with my cardio side,
yeah.
So actually that's when I found jujitsu.
Okay.
My buddy Ryan, he had been telling me about jujitsu for a long. He talks about it on his podcast a lot, and
Yeah.
then there's Jocko. I listen to his podcast quite a bit. Like there's all these other guys I'm surrounded by at this point that were like Jocko, or excuse me, jujitsu. Like you got to do this. Like it's awesome. And being a former wrestler, I was like, yeah, this kind of resonates with me. This would be kind of cool. Like I get to try to choke people out and let them try to choke me out. Being a
For
bigger
sure.
guy, like, man, I got this. This is awesome. You know,
Yeah.
I'm only 280 pounds. Like I could bury these
Yeah.
guys in the mats. You know what I mean? Like I'm
Yeah.
big, strong,
Now
and
I'm humbled.
yeah. And I went. I remember, and I went against a guy who was, you know, half my size, and he tore me to pieces for 5 minutes straight. And just I was about puking the whole time. But something inside of me at that point had worked my way up and was like, I'm just not going to stop showing up. I'm just going to keep coming back and see where this goes.
Hmm.
So it's these baby steps, you know, it's these things. Like I started stacking these new things on. And then from there, it was like, all right, what's my morning routine look like? What's my business life look like? What, you know, what kind of goals do I have? You know, I started stacking all these other things on top of it as I went and as I could handle them. And it just started to build up around me. And I
Right.
think, like I said, there's a lot of guys out there who try to stack all these things on at one time and don't master one of them first before moving on to the next one. And then it just like they fail at one and then, well, I failed. I'm done. I guess I'll, you know, whatever. Then they get back into their bad habits and it's, you know, and then it's done. That's it. So, you know, I knew that I couldn't do that. I knew I had to build these things up, really let it become a lifestyle, let it become a habit and become a true discipline. And
Yeah.
from there, it was gonna build something special in my life. And obviously now it's carrying over into business and relationships and you know, getting recognized and asked to come on podcasts and building more relationships and more communication. And it just goes on from there. And there's a lot of great things ahead. I'm sure there's a lot of struggles ahead as well. So
Yeah. No, absolutely. But that really is what the crux of what we've been talking about here. I think you've laid that out pretty clearly throughout this conversation as you've gone through your life, and I realize we've condensed it and we've gotten through
yeah,
it, you
yeah,
know,
yeah,
for sure. But you were doing one thing at a time. You were having success. You were failing. You were making a realization, and you weren't letting that overwhelm you. And I think hearing about it is that you were biting off what you could actually chew in those moments where it's like a lot of times we have failures, we try and fix the whole thing
oh
all at
yeah,
once, and because that's a natural inclination that
yep,
we want to make this right.
yep,
And taking those smaller steps towards your goal is going to get there. We hear that a lot, but it's
yeah,
much harder of like, just let me fix it
yeah,
now.
yeah,
And so, and that's where mentorship and the coaching and the experience and honestly, you just, I mean, we covered it already, but the parent factor there was, I mean, huge. It may not have been formal counseling, but at that time, it sounds like that was the best counseling and probably
oh
maybe the only counseling that would have really worked at that moment,
yeah.
even.
Oh,
So,
that was massive. That was a huge deal in our, you know, because it obviously if my marriage wasn't right, I wasn't gonna work on myself at, you know, at that point. Like most men don't. Like most men are like, oh, I gotta fix her. You know what I mean? Like I gotta fix this. I gotta fix this situation right now. Like, but I realized like no, we had to be fixed. We as individuals, we had to fix. You know, and I had to start working on myself as an individual and let that lead into her maybe making that decision as well to do the same thing, and then us to team up together to move
yeah,
forward. Um, and I know like it wasn't always that way in my life where I was necessarily just working on my like there's a lot of times where remember like early on in our marriage like I was trying to fix my wife like do this or do that like my mom
yeah.
does it this way why don't you do it that way
Oh,
or
yeah.
why isn't the house clean or why isn't dinner made this way, you know what I mean? Like I'm sure we've all been there, you
Right.
know, but like that wasn't getting me anywhere. That was getting
No.
me in the doghouse, man,
Yeah.
and real quick all the time. And that was and she hated that, you know, like
Right.
um
It's
man, there's
not going to get you the words of affirmation you were looking for.
no, that it wasn't getting me my love language, that's for sure. Exactly. And that was not good at all. And there was a lot of pain and there was a lot of strife and there was a lot of hurt and guilt and a lot of bad things happening within that. So yeah, that marriage counseling changed our lives as a couple, but changed our lives individually as well because we realized like, hey, we're a team. We've got to work on this together, but ultimately we got to work on this as individuals too. Like we're both individuals in the sense of like we got to work on ourselves and lead from the front, especially for me as a man. Like
Yeah.
I think leading from the front as a man, like would fix a lot of issues in today's world. Like if we take accountability for ourselves and start to stop making the excuses and actually take ownership over our lives, like
Yeah.
how much would that fix around us? You know what I mean? Like I can
Right.
tell you right now, it has fixed my whole life. Like not that I'm perfect in every way,
No,
but
I'm not
it has
hearing
helped
that.
me really get down a good path where, you know, my marriage is starting to thrive. My relationship with my kids is thriving. I'm starting to build some business stuff where that's kind of feels like it's starting to go right in some way, or at least I know that I have a sense of where I want to go with it, you know, and God's speaking to me through some of that. You know, there's a lot of good things starting to happen, but I had to go down this journey and take these small steps along the way to get to that point.
Yeah, no, that definitely comes through as you've been sharing. Well, look, what I mean now you how are things evolving now, like today? What where are you at with your businesses? You've talked a lot about it. You've talked about these experiences that you have. And hey, man, your mind is constantly working. You're thinking of
Of course.
improving what you're doing. So what can everybody expect you? And if everybody's like me, when I engage with you through social media, it's now, okay, well, how do I engage more with this guy? What can I expect coming
Yeah.
out of, this man as he's learning from his family, as he's wanting to, have impact on other men, on other families? Talk about that a little bit.
Yeah. What I've had to do is I've had to kind of almost in a way like simplify my life. Like instead of looking at things as like a whole, like look at the things as individual things. So like for me, it's like faith, family, hunting, and training. Like I've got these kind of four areas that I really enjoy. Like those are my four core areas that I've like have really worked on the last few years, especially the last few years, you know.
Hmm.
And so I kind of look at things in those like those quadrants. And I
Yep,
kind of have different goals and different, you know, things I'm working on in each of those areas. So that's really my life right now, is just working on those areas. You probably see that just from my social media posts. Like you see
absolutely.
some hunting, you see some business, you see some family, you see some faith, you know, you see me talking about my struggles, you know, how I'm working on them, what I've had to do, you know, some of those things. And like that's kind of what, like if you come to my Instagram especially, like that's what I'm talking about, that's what I'm doing, I'm showing little bits and pieces of that, and you know, and trying to show that in an authentic way. Um so you know, for me it's like, you know, honestly my faith has really, through this physical transformation that I've made, like my mental, emotional, spiritual side has really just is taking to was really taken to the next level, just because of that physical transformation. And now it's like opening up these new areas. Like man, like you can do this same thing like in your faith, like you can do this, you can have the same leveling up in your intellectual side, you can you know, in your social side, in your business side, like all these other areas. So that's really where I'm at. Like I'm just continuing to go down this path and work on these individual quadrants, these individual little areas that I've identified that I'm passionate about and that are
Sure.
important in my life. And you know, I really, honestly, I'm not making a ton of plans. Like I'm not trying to plan out my life. I'm trying to kind of just let God steer me and God guide me in those different areas, and kind of let them, you know, obviously there's some structure in some of those areas that you have to have, you know, but overall, like I'm just like, all right, God, you know, my hands are up, like I'm yours, like do what you want to do with me. And
Yeah.
you know, and honestly, the last probably 5-6 months, it's really like my faith has really kicked up, where I'm really just trying to hear God's voice in those different areas, and just pray about them and think about them, and talk to my wife about them, talk to my mentors about them, you know, surround myself with more guys who are, you know, thinking about those same things and like-minded in that way.
Yeah.
And you know, I'm just trying to figure out like, okay, where do I go from here? So, you know, like high caliber hunts, like we've kind of been talking about this hunting business that I, you know, that I'm starting to build as a side business. And really what that is it's kind of stemmed from me leveling up and getting around high caliber guys. And I realized like through that journey, I've got a lot of these guys on social media that are reaching out to me like every day. Like I've got new guys like, hey man, I heard you on this podcast. I looked at your social media feed, like, dude, you're getting after it. Like you got a lot of really good people around you. Like, how did you do this? Like
Yeah.
how do I get this? How do I do this? And, you know, obviously, because I try to share authentically, and when guys message me, like, I just say, man, you got to start building a band of brothers. You got to start working on yourself. You got to take ownership over yourself. And thank God there's a lot of books and resources and podcasts and I mean, the tools are all there. The resources are
Yeah,
all there.
no,
Like,
there's not a good excuse anymore for
no,
not educating yourself. That's for
there's
sure.
no excuse. I think the lack right now that we have is honestly just guys who will authentically and openly like call people out. That's
Hmm.
really what there's lacking. And I can tell you, like, that was me. Like, I didn't have a lot of guys necessarily, and partially I was also needed to be humbled. Like, I had to fall on my face a little bit. Obviously, we've talked about some of that. So I had to fall on my face in a way where it like affected me enough to like say, all right, you've got to make some changes. So I think some people get that on a deeper level, whether it's a drug addiction or a sex addiction or whatever that looks like for them in their life. They might have to really go off the deep end before they really make a change in their life. For me, like, didn't really have any big addictions or anything like that. It was just more like I just didn't have a lot of good mentors early on that really taught me some of these things that I wish I would have known earlier. But that's okay, because now I have been going through those different changes and making those changes. But yeah, man, it's interesting. Like, I get a lot of these guys reaching out, like, how do you make these changes? How do you do this? How do you do that? And that's where like it kind of feeds into my content now. Like, man, there's a lot of guys asking about these kinds of things. I need to
Right.
share some of these things. I need to be more authentic about where I used to be in that and where I'm trying to go with that. So just listening to that voice, like, tell me,
Yeah.
like, and I know it's God. I know, and
Yeah.
in my faith, I believe the Holy Spirit is speaking to me, and He's saying, like, hey, like, listen to me, like, I'm going to direct your path. I'm going to help you. And that's where high caliber hunts kind of comes in. It's like, I wanted to create something where is this old school hunting camp mentality, like this cool place we could get
Yeah.
together, break
It is
bread,
cool. Yeah.
conversation, have a time of camaraderie and connection. But let's take that to the next level where it's like guys who are all working on themselves, guys who are trying to level up, guys who like maybe don't know how to build a band of brothers, but maybe can come in and find a like-minded group of people to start having some deeper conversations with, um, and maybe start doing some business deals with, or maybe start, hey, like, we're from the same area, let's hang out or whatever, you know what I mean? Like,
Yeah.
you just don't
No.
know. Like, my camps, I've done two high caliber hunting camps, what I call hunting camps, and back in the spring, and they were awesome. Like, the guys loved it. It was random people from all over the country, like, some pretty high level. I've had some authors there. I've had some, some pretty well-known influential type people there at these different events. And then I've had some just regular guys who were just getting after it in life or trying to get after it.
Sure.
And it's been
Yeah.
really cool to see that kind of come together. And so there's a concept there. There's viable, like, I've made a little bit of money, like, that I'm putting back into the business. Like, I'm not, it's just a side gig at this point, but
Yeah.
it's like, hey, there's something here. Like, this is something that people want. But as I've went through that and, went through a couple of those camps, I'm like, man, there's something deeper here. This isn't just a hunting camp thing now. This is like, there's more here. And obviously I've been kind of part of like some different men's groups. And here's what I realized, like, we're still lacking. Like, even though there's some big men's groups out there, like, just to name one, like the Iron Council, Order of Man, Ryan Mickler, he's one of my mentors. He's one of my good friends.
Sure.
I've been part of his community. I'm still part of that community. It's an amazing community. There is still a need for more men like that. That's only 1,000 and 2,000 guys right there. We need
Right.
tens, hundreds of thousands of guys coming and doing these and working on themselves in the same way that I am, in the same way
Right.
that you are. And then some of us are going to be called, which I feel God is calling me. He's saying, you know what? Use your story to help others. Use your story to make that impact. Share the vulnerable areas that you don't really like to share, because you know what? That's truly what's going to help people resonate with your story.
Yeah.
That's what's going to truly help them, like, have that moment of like, man, I need to change too. You know what I mean? So
Yeah.
that's what high caliber hunts has become, is like this idea of getting guys together. But now it's kind of going, and we kind of talked about this before we started recording, like, God's working on me a little bit now too. Like, he's got some different plans for me. I thought it was just going to be these hunting camps where it's just random guys getting together, but he's kind of partially starting to tell me, like, hey, maybe this can be a ministry opportunity where, guys can come in. They don't have to be a Christian or whatever necessarily, but there's going to be a good word spoken within that hunting camp. There's going to be a little more structure to it. There's going to be a little bit of curriculum. We're going to do some hunting, and we're going to enjoy that part of it. But
Mm-hmm.
maybe we're going to have a guy who is a pastor or maybe just a men's speaker come in and have some actual structure that we kind of get more intentional about what we talk about and what we're working on, so we can go home and take some of these tools and these resources, kind of like the counseling stuff,
Yep.
not in a way better way, not
Yeah.
like a
Yeah.
counseling
No,
session. I don't want to
for
make it
sure.
sound like that, but
No, I
in a
don't. I
cool
don't
way,
hear
a
that.
cool
Yeah.
counseling session where it's like, man, that makes sense. And like now we go home and now that impact is directly on our families, our communities, our employers, our employees, whatever, man. Like
Yeah.
there's so much opportunity for us to grow and help each other and help each other level
Right.
up, that I'm just like, man, there's more here. And I know God's got a plan for it. Just show me the way, like I said, and I'm
Yeah.
just going to try to listen and follow that path. So I'm really still trying to figure that out, man. I'll be honest. Like I'll be
Yeah.
totally transparent. Like I'm still trying to figure out what that looks like. And I've had like this week was a super busy week because I've been on several calls with different mentors and different people that I really trust and really have had a lot of success in their life and business and some of the different things that they've built. And even though I've had some early success, like I'm back to square one, and it's like I want to learn. I want to use what I've learned in some of those prior business things, but
Mm-hmm.
now business isn't just about the money and the influence and how cool I look and how the cool people I get to hang out with is part of that. No, it's a totally different level here. Like this is actually about not me, but about others and how I can help them grow and level up in their own life. So, man, I don't know where this is going to go. I don't know what it looks like exactly, but it might not even be high caliber hunts in the future. I don't even know, man. Like
Yeah.
I'm totally open to it, honestly. Like whatever that looks like and wherever God leads me down that path, I'm just going to follow along and try to be that vessel, try to be that rudder that kind of steers the way and just tries to do good, I guess.
Yeah. No, what I love about that is if you take an incredible experience that hunting in and of itself creates a bond that you can't explain to a non-hunter.
Yeah.
I've heard people try. You can't. Now over challenge, over struggle, people create bonds over a number of different things.
Yes.
But if you're able to harness that experience and then bring someone in to help men frame what's going on in there, whether it be to set some structure, that curriculum that you're
Yeah.
talking about, or help talk through some of those conversations that happened the prior night at hunting camp, I think there's a lot of value in that to walk away because we attach memories stick with us when something important happens, and
Yes.
that happens when we have fun. It
Yep.
also happens when we have a deep encounter with ourselves and have
Yep.
to look ourselves really hard, and then to be able to walk away with that with the steps to
Yeah.
correct that. And so where you're going is really cool. I'm anxious to see kind of where you land, and it's going to evolve. It sounds like
Yeah. Of
even
course.
in that moment. But it's a really cool concept that I think is going to gain a lot of traction. And yeah,
That's
man,
I was just gonna say, Steve, that's a really great point, honestly, because I was talking to one of my mentors the other day. His name's Brad, and he's been in the hunting industry for a long time, and he's also a pastor, and so he's dealt with youth and men's ministry and some of those kinds of things. So I was like, man, I need to really start to talk to Brad about some of these things that have been stirring around in my heart, about this, because he's seen what I'm doing and he knows I've had a lot of success. And um, he was like, you know what? You're on the right path. Like which I already know I am because I'm creating this experience, and
yeah,
that's the idea is not just about the hunt. Like you and I both understand this as hunters, like hunting unfortunately has kind of become about the kill a little bit and
hmm
like how cool you look on social media.
yeah,
And I don't like that. I'm not a big fan of that. Like, don't get me wrong. I want to have success in my hunts. I work hard. I get after it. And I want to be just like everybody else and show my nice big buck or big bull or whatever on my social media. Nothing wrong with that. But that is far from what hunting is about, as
right,
you kind of alluded to. And it's really this deeper level. And that's where it's like creating this experience around that is what I think is really driving me. It's like I don't want somebody to come on a hunt and just remember what they killed. I want them to come on a hunt and remember that impactful conversation they had with somebody in camp, or a good word that they heard from whoever was speaking, or maybe sitting around the campfire having a beer and a cigar, like just somebody spoke into their life in a way that they'd never been spoken into. Like, dude, you have a lot of talent, or you have a lot of skill. Why don't you do this? Why don't you do that? You just don't know what's going to happen in that moment and how that's going to really make an impact on somebody's life. Because I know I've sat around some camps where there was no impact and it was just about the hunting and the
It's
killing
just
and,
surface. Yeah.
just the
Yeah.
surface level stuff. But I've also been in some hunting camps, and even my high caliber hunts already were super impactful and super deep, not just for the guys who were there, but for me myself as well.
Yeah.
And I look back to that and I think, man, like that's what we need. We need more of that. And it just happens that my passion and my skills lie around hunting because I enjoy that. And that's what I love. That's the industry I've been part of for many years. That's where all my resources are. That's where my connections are, those kinds of things. But Brad mentioned, he's like, man, like I've been in a lot of like youth retreats, what they call retreats or whatever.
Yeah.
Which I hate that they call them retreats. I always think, man, well, this isn't a retreat. This is a pursuit. You know what I mean?
Yeah. I like it.
But anyway, church talk,
That's right.
But Brad said, like, he's like, as a youth pastor, like I have kids that come up to me 10 years later that remember the lesson I taught in youth camp, like kid church camp or whatever. And they still remember that. And it still has changed their life. And that's an impact that made it on, it has been made
Yeah.
on them. And I'm like, man, like we could do that for men. Like we can do that same thing for men. Like they could come in and like maybe something's been stirring in their heart. Maybe they've been struggling with their faith or with their marriage or with a part of their life. And it might just connect the dots enough where it's like gets them down this new path.
Yeah. Well, it's the foundation, man. It's if you have that experience once and are given some tools, when you have a breakdown in your life, there's something you can return to. It's kind of like the example of you talking about your wife and counseling. Look, man, when you hit a rocky place in your marriage in the coming years, you all have experienced counseling.
Yep.
You've experienced the value that was in your life, and you realized what was on the other side of it.
Yep.
And so now it's not a floundering when you're like, whoa, we got a problem here. It's not, what do we do about it? It's now I know what to do about it. We need to run to that. And those memories and things that happen in a hunting camp can be that a little bit different. Maybe it's not
Yeah.
perfect illustration,
Yeah.
but
Yeah.
it's the idea of like, hey, when I was with these guys, we were having a lot of fun. We talked about some stuff. We came to a place that, hey, we're all struggling with these different things in our lives. And this thing is really coming to the surface right now. And I was told this when we were sitting around the campfire. I was told this from a man that I respect, from a man that I look to. And, I'm talking in idealistic terms here, but I think that's reality when it comes to it. I'm going to trust guys I was in hunting camp way more than I'm going to maybe trust guys that I did something else with. I don't maybe have a good example right there of that, but I just, there's a bond.
Part of it is too that like the way I'm marketing it, in a sense, like I'm marketing this to guys who like, hey, you're coming into a hunting camp to be around other guys who are on that like-minded path already,
Yeah.
or want to be on that path at least. So I think it does put you, like I've already seen, like it has put those people around the people that they need to be around on that level. So it does open up that opportunity. And then, I've had to be intentional, and some of the people in camp, fortunately, like we as a group have had to be intentional about how we start conversations and kind of start opening up ourselves too. And I just want that to go on a deeper level. That's where I think having other people as part of this, or having a speaker come in, or somebody who's influential, like, as a pastor or whatever, come in and like, they know how to do that. Like, that's what they're good at. They're good at being intentional in that way where, this, Steve, just as well as I do, like as men, we don't just sit around and like, all right, we're going to start getting deep now into our conversation. Like it's a lot of surface. How's the weather? Like how things have been going? How's the hunting been? You know what I mean? Like, it's just how we are, man. It's kind of funny how that works, but it's just how we are. But like in this setting, like I'm trying to be really intentional about like letting that deeper conversation actually happen by having a bit of that vulnerability, just putting you in a setting where you actually feel comfortable to do that. Not everybody's going to, of course, but if you want to, you're gonna do that. Some of the things I just thinking about this right now too is like I'm actually kind of getting ready to go to another retreat or a pursuit, and it's like a 4-day deal. It's gonna be I'm going to Illinois and then I come back for a week and then I'm gonna be going to that 4-day event. And
Okay.
really, so what's really cool about this? It's a men's Christian event. It's for guys who want to get deeper in their faith and want to get a clearer path on where they're supposed to go. And part of the homework leading up to, which is I think is really cool, that they've actually have some stuff they want us to do before we come to it, which is really interesting because I've been to some stuff like that before where like you just show up and that's it. Like, but these guys are like, they're sending me emails like, do this, read this, check this out, and it's been amazing. Like I reread through Wild at Heart,
That's a
John
great book.
Eldridge's book, which is a book that really I didn't mention it, but when I was going through marriage counseling and some of that time before that, actually it was before that, like I had read that book and it had changed my life, literally, like just made me think about things totally differently, as a faith-based man already at that point too.
Yeah.
But I got to reread through that over the last couple weeks. They've been doing some of these different emails where they're kind of going through some scripture stuff and like what it means and how it pertains to your life and like what's going on in your life right now. It's been like, whoa, like, and that's where some of this conversation about like, man, I don't know where I'm going with high caliber hunts, because like my mind is like blown right now with some of this stuff leading up to this pursuit event that I'm going to. So, just thinking about that, like on a business standpoint, it's like, man, that could be kind of cool before guys come into a hunt, like just gear them up for like they think they're signing up for a hunt, but all of a sudden, like they start getting these emails from these different people, like speaking into their life. Hey, check this out, or here's a cool resource, or here, check this out. And like all of a sudden, like they're amped, like totally amped up, and they get there and like just blown away.
Well,
So that's where that experience could be taken to even another level. And I'm like, man, why didn't I think of that?
yeah. Well, I mean, you're subtly framing what is going to happen, because when you're by yourself working through material and then you come together, that becomes the small talk, right? Because you're aware that someone else was looking at that already.
Yep.
And rather than it being the weather or, hey, last year's buck I shot or whatever, it just creates common ground, and it slightly nudges you a little bit closer to where you need to be. And in that same vein, man, a really cool thing that happens, I think, I know just from past experience around counseling, particularly group counseling, is it's really important for somebody to know how to direct a conversation in group counseling, where you're not necessarily teeing up the conversation, but you're able to call someone out to go deeper about something, or you're able to ask the proper probing question. And things like that can be really subtle, and men respond well to those things. And all that, I just bring that up, just that's encouragement to this. This is really cool. I'm anxious to see how you flesh it all out, because I think, yeah. I think some men, and it's okay to, as you work through it and maybe do a couple of these and maybe flounder a little bit to figure out what works and get some feedback, man. You're onto something cool.
What's interesting though, Steve, is I've always been one of those guys who in my business stuff, like I've been pretty behind the scenes and quiet. Like I was kind of secretive and hidden about what I was working on. And I kind of like thought that was cool. But actually it got to this point in my life where it's like, man, I'm just going to talk about it, because I think that's going to really build it up and get people excited about what potentially could be coming in the right way. Like, why hold this behind the scenes? Like, why not just share it? Like, because maybe there's somebody out there who's trying to build their own business and like trying to work through their own things and what they're building too.
Yeah.
They like, man, look at what Collin's doing. Like he's working through this. He's trying new things. He's trying this. That isn't working, but that's working. Or he's opening up this idea to try it this way. Like it might inspire somebody else on a business entrepreneurial level to like totally do something different than they ever thought that they were going to try to do or could do.
Oh, that's perfectly reasonable to think through that. Yeah, man. Man, we cover some ground. This is cool, man. This is cool. Just to think about kind of.
I love podcasting because of this, though, because we can have these actual deeper, long form conversations and actually get into some topics and kind of really flesh them out.
Yeah, no, and man, I didn't tell you or plan on being all about marriage and counseling, but
I didn't think it was going to go that
I
way
think
either.
some folks out there, it'll be a good word for them to hear and maybe connect. And hey, if one marriage says, hey, let's go to get some counseling, or let's look at this a little bit differently, have a new perspective, 100% worth it. So it was really cool. Man, thanks for just being vulnerable with some of that stuff,
Hmm.
because like I said, even you brought it out. Sometimes we get a little reserved and bringing up family stuff for good reason. There's sometimes it's not need to put everything out, but there's appropriate time and place. And for whatever reason today, you shared that, and I'm really grateful that we took the time to kind of walk through that. It definitely gave me some things to think about as I wrote down a few things here on my pad, and it's been good. I didn't necessarily create space. You said the high caliber hunts is a little bit more of a side gig right now. Do you have something else that you're just all in on, kind of the daily grind?
Man, I'll be transparent in that too. Like honestly, like so through my physical transformation, my coach, he said, "Hey man, like you did an awesome transformation, like, and you're really good with people. Would you like to come on my team and help me coach some guys? Like try it out, see how it goes." So I've been working for him, actually
Cool.
coaching underneath him as kind of a health consultant, health coach, really an accountability partner.
Yeah,
But
awesome.
I was working with like 40 guys. I'm down to like 20 guys right now. It's kind of dwindling down a little bit, but I don't necessarily think that that's my path. It's kind of just where I'm at right now, and I enjoy it, like, because it's very value driven. I'm helping people. I'm learning about people on a deeper level. I'm getting a chance to work with these men and talk to them and get to know them too.
Yeah.
Um, Build relationships with them, but also in a way where it's like these guys are losing weight and like they're getting their life back, just like I've gotten my life back. So that's been really
Yeah.
cool. So that's something I'm kind of working on, is still doing some of that on the side. I'm still doing a little bit of consulting on the side as well, but I'm just doing whatever I got to do to make ends meet, man. Like
You
that's
got
kind of where I'm
family you
at
gotta
right
take
now,
care of.
honestly. Like I just luckily I have these marketing skills that I can always kind of tap back into when I want to, and I can reach out to some people and say, hey man, you need a website, or you need a logo, or you want to rebrand something, or do you want to go to a different direction with something. I always kind of have people to reach out to, and
Perfect.
it just seems like God always provides too. Like that's it's stressful at times, but it's like I kind of just like lay it out there to him and say, you know what, whatever, like we're gonna figure this out. Our bills are hopefully gonna get paid, and they always do. And it always comes
Right.
through, and it always happens. Thank God for that. But I work hard too. I get after it when I have opportunities. So I'm kind of going down this path, like trying to figure that out right now. Like, what is my full-time path? Is it, high caliber hunts? Is there more around high caliber hunts? Maybe doing some merch, a podcast, building my own men's community where we're, helping each other level up.
Yeah.
Like I've got some different things I'm working on in that sense. And like, it's part of my, my goals and plans for the coming years to really flesh that out even deeper. But I'm just kind of in this transition, like I told you before, in a little transition period where I'm just doing what I'm supposed to do in these little areas, and just continuing to level up, because that's only going to help me as I move forward, and just kind of like waiting for God's voice and some of that.
Right on, man. Well,
But I
well,
am taking action, so don't get that wrong, guys. Like you don't just sit there and wait. Like you got to take action. So
yeah,
I want to make sure I mention
yeah,
that.
no, absolutely, man, definitely. Well, how does everybody get in touch with you? How do they reach out? You talked about Instagram being a good place. Just kind of go through that when people look you up. Obviously, everybody that's listening, we're gonna get stuff in the show notes. Go there. I know podcasts say that all the time, but I feel like so many people reach out to me and they're like, "Hey, where did I check this?" Go to the show notes. I'll always respond, but we try and get these things in the show notes, but just tell everybody that's listening how to get in touch and just see what's going on in your life, because your social media stuff is awesome, man. It's inspiring. How do they check out what's going on with
Yeah,
you?
yeah, and you can obviously go to my Instagram, and that's a easy way to connect with me. And I would say, hey, definitely do drop me a message. Let me know you heard me on the show here with Steve. I love to connect with guys. If you have any kind of questions, like nothing's off limits, I'm happy to help out. I try to give as much value as possible. So, at Collin_Cottrell, you can see my name right here on the screen, of course, if you're watching it. Do people watch this, or is it mostly just a listener?
It mostly is I always put it up on the YouTube channel, but
Cool.
it's definitely more people are tuning in through
Cool.
all the
Well,
podcast platforms.
I'll spell it out then. It's Collin, COLLIN underscore Cottrell, COTTRELL. And then you can just go to my website as well and connect with me there. You can, drop me an email or whatever there. It's collincottrell.com. Simple as that. So those are kind of like the two go-to areas right now. Obviously, I have a website for high caliber hunts. I have a media company called C3 Media. Like, you can go to all those connections through my personal website. But yeah, man, I just love to hear from guys. If there's something we can do together to help each other grow, let's do that.
Right on, man. And you had mentioned Wild at Heart. Are there any other resources that really maybe recently just come to mind that have helped you kind of think through some of this stuff that you can kind of give a shout out to? That I'm a big reader, and I like to take a deep dive into stuff like that. I don't have a problem with shouting people out.
Yeah.
But if there's something that really impacted you, just to connect your story to some resources.
Yeah, absolutely. And I'm actually I'm pulling up my Audible right now. That's like my go-to. Like, off the top of my head, like, I definitely I'm trying to think here, like um The Comfort Crisis. That was a really good book that really got me out of my
That's Michael Easter, right?
Yep, Michael Easter. And really that pushed me to another level of like getting out of my comfort zone a lot. And I've always kind of been a guy who has been out of his comfort zone and never been afraid to pursue things like in business and entrepreneurship and a lot of those things. But honestly, like, there's, I never mentioned this during our podcast, but I'm actually working on running 100-mile ultra in next February. I don't, so if you do follow me on social media, you're going to see my training. I post a lot about that every day. And a lot of people don't know, like, that's what I'm training for. I'm training for a 100-mile ultra. I've never ran a marathon. I've never even ran a half. I mean, I have now, like, not a, like, an actual
official
race, official, but I've ran a half marathon, but the only thing I had ever ran was a 5K before. So I'm like going up the ladder. I have a coach. He's working with me, and I'm getting ready to run this race. So that Michael Easter's book, The Comfort Crisis, was definitely one of those books who like totally changed my mindset about things. And I was like, man, like, that's awesome, man. Like, we got to get out of our comfort zone. I'm trying to think what else, some of these other books that I've really been reading lately. Man, another good one. I'm trying to find it here. Extreme Ownership, obviously, Jocko Willink. That's a really good one. Everybody should absolutely read that one, for sure. There's one more here. I'm trying to remember what the name of it was. Ryan Mickler just had a book come out called the Masculinity Manifesto. That was super awesome. That was a really good book. I definitely recommend that one. I read David Goggins' book. That's another good one, Can't Hurt Me, which he actually just announced today. He's got a second book coming out.
Oh, does he really? So that's awesome.
Just literally announced it like a couple hours ago. So I already pre-ordered it. I'm like, sweet, that's gonna be a good one. Man, there's one more that I'm trying to find it here in my Audible. It was let me see if I can find it here really quick.
Yeah, you're good.
Ed Milet, The Power of One More. I'm actually halfway through that. That's been really, really good. I read a lot of books, or I listen to a lot of books now. Obviously, I have a lot of time running.
Yeah, how about it? No, it is a good time to listen.
But man, there's one more book that I'm trying to remember. I can't find it in my thing here. I thought it was in my Audible. Maybe it's not. I'll think about it later.
Well, hey, wait, you just let me know. We'll throw it in the show notes, and we'll say, hey, the one that we couldn't think of, and everybody will go to that one. And we'll flood Amazon with that one. Yeah. So no,
basically the book talks about like how we as individuals, like, we try to do everything ourselves, but really what makes things flourish and what makes things better is when we actually like have other people become part of our businesses and help us build those businesses. And that can be extended obviously into so many other areas of our life. So Amazing book. It was super, super well done.
Yeah. Awesome, man. Well, we'll figure it out. We'll get it there. So everybody knows what it is, but no, I appreciate that. I just always am curious what people are reading, and always mindset,
Me too.
Understand. So I appreciate you just kind of off the cuff. I'm sorry, I
No, I
threw
love
that on
that,
you.
dude.
So
That's awesome. Like a lot of people don't ever ask those kinds of things actually on podcasts, and those are like, that's why I would want to listen to your podcast, just because you never know who's going to mention a different book or a different resource or whatever. Like, go check out this or go to this email list or whatever. Like, there's a lot of good stuff out there. So I'm a geek on that kind of, especially in the self-improvement stuff now, just leveling
absolutely.
up in life. Like, I'm always looking for new ways and new, thinking about new things. So
100%. Well, brother, man, this has been so good. It's refreshing. I know it's late and you're just staying up from your family and stuff, but I really appreciate you this taking time and to take a deep dive kind of into life and in the direction you're going. It was incredibly helpful for me to hear even tonight, and I believe it'll be the same. So I just encourage everybody reach out to Collin, let him know how this was impactful for you and what you really. I'd love to hear people's goals once they hear a show like this to say, hey, this is the thing I want to change. Don't change everything. I hope you heard that too tonight, but pick something
yeah,
tomorrow when you wake up to do something different. And if you're listening in the morning on your commute, do something different when you get home from work today, one thing at a time. But I will give you the final word, brother, if you can just send us off with just some of your final thoughts after we had this conversation tonight.
no, I think you ended that really well. That's actually one way I like to end podcasts. I like to say, just pick something and just get off your butt and get after it and start making some small changes and let that compound from there. Let those baby steps happen,
Yeah,
and good things are going to happen from there, man. It's not going to be perfect. It's going to, there's going to be some ups and downs, but that's just the reality of how things work in life. So yeah, just get after it, man.
right on. So cool. Well, thanks for your time tonight, and look forward to hopefully catching up with you here in the future, brother.
Yeah, man.
Thank you.
No, I appreciate it, Steve. Thank you so much.
Hmm.